Hey guys, it's also back with a quick PvP guide on the balanced druid in phase 1 of Season of Discovery. In this video I'll quickly be going over the strengths and weaknesses of druid as a class, the different talent builds that are used for instance and open world PvP, the runes that I swap out for different situations, the macros and add-ons that I find helpful, as well as the stat priorities on gear and what other gear that I recommend as well. If you're interested in flag carrying, I'll have a brief section at the end going over flag carrying in Warsong Gulch, any tips and tricks that I can provide for you guys to succeed in that regard as well. If you find the guide helpful, you can like this video, subscribe, as well as leave a comment down below, giving me your opinion on what you think of the video, as well as any future videos that you want to see. And you can also catch me live at Twitch at twitch.tv/auto_wow, where I'll be doing my own grind to Exalted in Warsong, either flag carrying or just blasting as balance in open world PvP as well. So yeah, hope you guys enjoy the guide, and let's jump right in. So when it comes to balanced druid as a spec in PvP, it's important to note that druid as a whole, as a class, is very powerful because of their flexibility in their hybrid playstyle. So being able to dish out a large amount of damage, on top of being able to heal and tank damage, as well as run flags with their increased speed, makes them incredibly flexible, incredibly powerful. So that is probably the main strength of druid as a class, and balanced druid is no exception to this. Balanced druid is also extremely mana efficient in how they deal damage. So the fact that Fury of Stormrage makes their Wrath cost 0, on top of the fact that Star Surge only costs 4 mana every 6 seconds, you can do 90% of your damage rotation with barely any mana cost at all. So this leaves your whole mana bar open to either CCing, to shifting in and out of form, or to healing your allies as well. So this makes it incredibly potent to be able to be at 0 mana and still doing 90% of your damage. It's very attractive. It's also why balanced druid I think right now is very, very strong, mainly due to Star Surge's high damage and low mana cost. Next up, when it comes to the weaknesses of balanced druid as a class, the first thing to mention is that there's little to no AoE damage in our toolkit. We're only able to multi-dot to be able to damage multiple targets, however most of the time we're just going to be focusing single target. This isn't the biggest deal, however, since mainly you want to be focusing healers, single target anyway. However, if there is ever a group of players that you want to be cleaving down, balanced druid isn't really set out to do that. The next thing would also be that druid as a class has very little reliable CC. All we really have in our toolkit is a stun in bear form, which can be resisted very often, as well as a root which can be broken with very small amounts of damage, and a hibernate which is only usable on hunter pets and druids in form. So when it comes to being able to control players, druid is not very strong, and we do not have any long forms of CC or reliable CC. And the final weakness of the druid class I wouldn't necessarily consider a weakness, but I find that the complexity of the class makes for quite a high learning curve when it comes to performing at the optimal level as a druid. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad, it's just that it's hard for a newer player to be able to grasp all the different capabilities that you're able to accomplish in any given situation. Also when it comes to flag carrying, there's a whole bunch of game knowledge that you need to have, as well as jumping mechanics that can be very, very difficult for a new player to try. So if you're interested in trying a very hard class, this is not a weakness. However, for most players, they might find it frustrating. So when it comes to the talent build section of the video, I have two main different specs for PvP as a balanced druid, and there's a whole bunch of variations with these two specs that you can put in to adjust to your playstyle and how you enjoy PvPing. And the first one I like to call the artillery support spec. This is balanced druid with high damage at a very long range, however with very low mobility, so you're going to be struggling to get around or to escape from fights. However, you can fight from such a long range and it's really difficult for people to get away from you. I find this build to excel if you're just DPSing in mid in Warsong Gulch, or in open world being able to gank people at a close range and then they can't even run away by the time you've killed them. So this build utilizes Star Surge as the main damage ability. Well, every balanced build uses Star Surge as your main balance ability, but this increases its range to 42 yards and increases its damage as well. So what you want to pick up is 5 out of 5 improved Wrath, This is just a filler damage ability that costs 0 mana when you use the Fury of Stormrage rune. I'll be going over all the runes later on. However, I use 5 out of 5 Improved Wrath. Nature's Grasp is just a must-have PvP talent for all specs. It's so good, it's 1 point, and you can get any melee off you fairly easily. And then there comes some options. So what I would prefer for PvP is just to go 3 out of 3 Entangling Roots and 3 out of 3 Natural Shapeshifter. So this allows you to go in and out of bear form easily, as well as being able to root any melee that have jumped on top of you without getting interrupted or getting any pushback. You can also root Hunter Pets, or anyone really, anyone trying to run away as well. And then you want to pick up Nature's Reach, 2 out of 2. And this is what's going to give you that incredibly large Star Surge range that you can basically artillery nuke people from across the map in Warsong. It's so good. The final point can go into pretty much anything. You can put it into Improved Moonfire here. And then finally you want to pick up a pretty funny talent. It's called Improved Starfire, and this works for Star Surge as well. So what this does is it gives your Star Surge a very, very small chance, a 3% chance to stun your target for 3 seconds. This is very funny when it works. It's quite strong when it does work. However, we're only getting 1 point in it right now. It means it's not the most strong talent right now. Alternatively, if you want to mix around some talents, if you just want to be in your raid spec instead of having to respec for PvP, you can just PvP blast in your raid spec. So that would just be 5 out of 5 in Moonfire, 3 out of 3 in Thorns, 2 out of 2 in Nature's Reach, and then 1 out of 1 in Vengeance. You can drop a point in Thorns though to get that Nature's Grasp and to get that 1 point in Vengeance. So this is fine for PvP and PvE as well. However, it's definitely not ideal. The next spec I have though is the Feline Swiftness Feral spec, which is good for balance as well. This allows you to be a lot more flexible in what you can do. You can either flag carry, you can chase people down in open world, you can get away from people in open world. This spec gives you a lot more mobility as well as defensive ability and speed. So starting off with the Feral tree, we get 5 out of 5 in Ferocity. This is a throwaway talent just to get down the tree. You can get 2 points in Brutal Impact. This gives your stun a bit more time, allows you to get away more. The stun isn't the best, it's a 1 minute cooldown and it can be resisted all the time. Then you can get 3 points in Feral Instinct, which you can put in Thick Hide as well. However, I don't think Thick Hide really provides much in the way of defensive ability. At least Feral Instinct will give you a bit extra reduced chance to be seen in stealth, which is a very powerful way to get into the flag room in Warsong Gulch. And then you get 1 point in Feral Charge. Extremely powerful, being able to gap close, to be able to get across the Warsong map, or to be able to interrupt a healer or a mage or anyone who's casting on you. It's a bit unreliable because you have to be at range to cast it. You need to have the rage in bear form to be able to cast it. So you won't always be able to use it. However, if you're sitting in bear form and you need to get away from a group of players, you can Feral Charge to someone far away, and being able to make space for yourself is so strong. And then the best talent that we have in this phase by far is the Feline Swiftness. 2 points in that, and you get 30% movement speed as long as you're outdoors. So this doesn't work while you're in the flag room or in the tunnel. However, when you're in Warsong or anywhere in open world, you'll be getting an insane movement speed increase, allowing you to pretty much chase anyone you want or get away from anyone you want. This is what makes flag carrying S tier for druids, and in general just such a strong PvP talent. And you want to get that 1 point in Nature's Grasp, and then I like to get the final 2 points in Fura to get a little bit of a chance to be able to get that 10 rage, allowing you to instantly Feral Charge when you swap into bear form. It's very unreliable, however when it works it's nice. It's just a bit of a throwaway talent. You can put some points into Improved Wrath, however for this spec in particular I choose not to use Fury of Stormrage, which means I'm not spam casting. This is mainly like a rot damage build, so I would go Survival of the Fittest, which I'll go over later in the rune section, Star Surge, Wild Growth, or Sunfire, depending on what I feel like using at the time. So this is more of like you Star Surge, you Moonfire, you swap into bear form, you wait till your cooldown in Star Surge is back up, you swap back out, you Star Surge, Moonfire, heal up. So yeah, it's not as consistent damage, but the burst's still there. the damage is still quite good, and the utility of everything else is S tier. It's amazing. So moving into the rune slots, I'll be going over each slot in particular, going over each option that is available and what I recommend. So when it comes to glove slots, there are two options. You can swap between these with a glove swap macro if you have two different gloves with the two different runes on them, but for Balance Druid I recommend Sunfire and Wild Growth. Sunfire is really strong if you just want a single target damage to the best of your ability. It's a bit mana intensive. I wouldn't recommend it for group content. Instead, if you're going to be doing group content, I would recommend Wild Growth. It's a very strong 5-person heal over time that heals around 400 to 500 damage. It's even strong as a single target heal. I use it on myself while I'm carrying flags, or while I'm running between bases you can drop a quick heal on the entire group. It's very strong to be able to be like a backup healer as well as doing a ton of damage. So if you want to do a bit more damage and you want to be a bit nuisance with Catform speed and Sunfiring while running around, Sunfire might be more for you. If you want to be more focused around playing around a group, then Wild Growth is a better option. Then when it comes to the chest slots, there are another two options which you can swap between with a chest swap macro. And these two options are the Fury of Stormrage rune, which gives you that incredibly high consistent damage of spamming Wrath. This is a lot better if you're using the improved Wrath talent and you never run out of mana. You can throw out some heals whenever it procs. It is very strong as a mid DPS. However, if you're going to be running flags, I would definitely recommend using Survival of the Fittest. This is very strong in duels versus melee, or in one-on-ones versus melee, because you get that reduced melee crit chance, and that 10% damage reduction flat and 20% in bear form is absolutely insane when it comes to carrying flags. It makes you so tanky. When you're in bear form, you're pretty unkillable if you have a healer on you. So Survival of the Fittest is something you should go out of your way to get. It's even strong when you're not flag carrying. You can just survive so many melee attacks. I definitely recommend picking that one up. Finally, in the leg slot, we have the only option for Balance Druid. By far the strongest ability in PvP in my opinion, at least for damage, and that is Star Surge. An insanely high damage ability that scales 100% with your spell power on a 42-yard range, instant cast, only costs 4 mana. It is insane. So Star Surge is the bread and butter of Balance Druid, and you want to just spam that on cooldown and you'll have a blast. So when it comes to stat priorities for Balance Druid and PvP, there are two different builds as previously mentioned in the guide. There's the single target focused balanced DPS build, and then there's the survival focused hybrid flag carry spec as well. When it comes to Balance Druid as a DPS, you want to focus on spell power, or more specifically arcane spell power, to boost your Star Surge damage, but obviously universal spell power helps with Wrath, Sunfire, Moonfire and everything else. And then you want to go from spell power, you want to get stamina after that, then you want to get intellect to get your mana pool up so you can throw out a couple heals here and there, and then you want to get armor to help against melee and physical damage, and then Spirit MP5 after that. Resistances are also useful if you can find them on your gear, however I wouldn't go out and search for resistances. But that is the Balance Druid DPS. Moving on, we have the survival hybrid flag carry spec. In this spec I would prioritize stamina as your most important stat, and then armor. This will greatly increase your survivability against both casters and physical damage. And then you go for intellect to get your mana pool nice and high so you can shift and heal as much as possible. And after that you want to get spell power and then spirits and MP5. So spell power and damage is not as much of a focus, however the damage is still pretty good. However, survivability for this build is definitely the priority. So here we are in game, just to talk about some gearing options that you can use. Keep in mind in PvP there's not really a strict best in slot for what you can use in PvP. There's obviously items that are better than others. However, in general, you just want to use the best gear that you have available to you, and then trying to kind of make your build around what you have at the time and what you want to look for in the future. I will, however, be pointing out some pretty useful items in particular that are fairly easy to get, or items that you want to be looking for depending on what you want to be doing in the game. So obviously the first and most important thing is you want to pick up your PvP trinket as soon as you hit rank 2. This is very useful for dispelling those fear stun and stuff like that. It's on a 5-minute cooldown, so you can't use it very often. However, there's not many trinket options we have available to us right now, so you definitely want to pick up that quickly as soon as you can. And then the Warsong Gulch helmet is only usable in Warsong, but it is extremely useful for both flag carrying and DPSing as a balanced druid. However, I think for DPSing there's a slightly better alternative. You can decide what you find is better, but this coupled alongside the survival of the fittest rune makes you so tanky, so I would definitely recommend picking this up. You basically become uncrittable from melee, and then casters as well can barely crit you as well. Besides that, however, we have the tier set, which is the only alternative that I would have to the Warsong helmet. If you have the tier helmet, it has really good stats of stamina, intellect, and so does the chest piece. So if you can get that 2-piece as a damage focused build, you want to get that 2-piece. You get a lot of damage from that as well. Besides that, there's the tailoring boots, which is my go-to crafted option for PvP. It is very powerful. I would definitely pick this up. It has saved me countless times, especially as a flag carrier. You can literally get swarmed by people and survive like an unimaginably large amount of damage. So it's on a 10-minute cooldown, which is quite long. You can only probably use it once or twice per game, depending on how long the game is. But when you need it, it is so good. Some other items that you can look out for if you're focusing more on survivability is you can look for these items that you get from the raid, the Hydrohide Cuirass that I have here. It has a large amount of bonus armor, which is very useful for going into bear form. You get about 3 times the amount of armor that you get on gear. So getting this bonus armor in your gear is super useful. It has high stamina, high intellect, and you can find other items like this as well. Like in Kellerus, he drops the Tome of Shadow Warding, which is huge for getting that bonus armor, stamina, intellect. And then also off the final boss, you get the Dagger of Willing Sacrifice, which again gives bonus armor, stamina, intellect, spell power, all stats that you really want to get. So those are really good options for gearing. I'm currently using the Rod of the Sleepwalker. It gives you a ton of spell power, a ton of intellect, a ton of spirit for regen. I don't have the dagger option, so this is definitely like a really good alternative. Obviously it's really hard to get though. But besides that, you can look for any eagle greens that you can find, things with intellect and stamina, even quest items such as these Night Watch pantaloons if you're Alliance. These gives you a ton of intellect, a ton of stamina. Any eagle greens will do really well for you in PvP as well. Okay, so quickly going over the add-ons and macros section of the video. Starting off with add-ons, I'm just going to quickly list the add-ons that I use, that I find useful. I don't use a ton of different add-ons, just a couple that help me visualize some stuff on the screen. You don't have to use all of these, this is just some suggestions. So the first add-on that I use is Lose Control, which just helps display the CCs in the center of the screen on top of my character. It shows me exactly how long they last, if I should trinket them, if I shouldn't. It's quite useful for information if that's what you want to look at. Another add-on that I use is Omni CC. This just helps track the cooldowns of my abilities. It just gives a better display on cooldowns. That's all it really does. The other add-ons that I use is Druid Bar Classic, which is it's a mana bar that displays while you're in cat or bear form. This just gives you some information on whether or not you should continue shifting if you have the mana to do so, if you have the mana to heal out of form, or if you should just stay in form because you don't have the mana to do anything else outside of form. And then the final add-on is Battleground Enemies. All this does is it just puts a display on the side of your screen for Warsong that shows the entire enemy team. From there you can click and target specific players. It's super useful if you're in a pre-made and you're trying to coordinate who to target specifically. So yeah, let's say there's a priest in the enemy team, you can see all the names of all the players, you can target a priest in particular and focus him down. The other add-on that's just generally very useful is Weak Auras. You should definitely get this add-on. It helps you track your dot timers, your cooldowns, everything pretty much. You can even get Weak Auras that track the enemy flag carrier's HP, so when it's about to die, it'll start displaying in chat when they're about to die. It's all very useful. I recommend you get these add-ons, but they're definitely not necessary to play the game. Okay, so the final section of the video is a quick guide on flag carrying. keep in mind that this is not an in-depth guide to flag carrying. I will not be going over all the jumps that you can do because there are many jumps. There are other videos out there that go over all the different jumps and they do it much better than I can. I will be streaming how I learned to flag carry myself because I'm certainly not the best flag carrier in the world. However, 3 quick tips for new flag carriers that are just trying out Druid for the first time is A, you do not want to run out into graveyard from the flag room if their team is about to res. So you get a weak aura that will track the battleground res timer so you know when to run out and when not to run out. Another thing is you don't want to run out into mid if you know that their entire team is waiting for you and your team is dead. You can also track the res timer on your allies, so when your allies res, then you can run out into mid and hopefully coordinate with them to connect with you and get you safely across. And then the last tip that I have is when you're sitting on roof and you're in your base and you have the flag and you're trying to protect it either by yourself or with someone else, you want your team to communicate with you where the enemies are coming from. So if they're coming from tunnel or they're coming from a ramp, you know where they are, and if you can stay one step ahead of them, then it'll be incredibly frustrating for them to try to chase you down, especially if they're unorganized. So while they're coming up from tunnel, you can be jumping down to connector, running out to graveyard, going to top of tunnel, and then when you see them coming out of ramp, you can jump back into tunnel, back up to roof, and you can keep them on this rat race for an incredibly large amount of time. If you want an in-depth guide to flag carrying, then you can put a comment down below in the comment section. I will try to impart as much wisdom as I have learnt while streaming and doing flag carrying myself. But I can leave that for another video if you guys want to see it. But yeah, that brings us to the end of the video. So if you made it to this part of the video, I want to thank you so much for watching and supporting my content. My Balanced Druid PvE guide has recently just gotten over 30,000 views, which is mind-boggling for me considering I've only just started this YouTube stuff. I did not expect it to grow this fast, but I've really enjoyed making these guides for you guys. Can't wait for phase 2 to see what comes next for both Balanced Druid and maybe even other classes if I decide to maybe delve into some other classes and some guides for them as well. I might make some PvP compilations going forward, or anything else you guys want to see. Just drop it down in the comments below. A like on the video is much appreciated. Subscribing to the channel, following me on Twitch, all of these things mean the world. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.